Julia Vero thought invisibility was her greatest skill, until she confronted a mafia boss in fluent Sicilian at a society wedding and signed her own death warrant. One moment of defiance, one cold-eyed stranger, one choice that would drag her from the shadows into a world where power is currency and survival demands blood. Stay until the end to see if she makes it out alive. Like this video and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Julia's story has traveled. The Augustine Hotel smelled like money, old money, the kind that didn't apologize for existing. Julia Vero stood in the service corridor just off the grand ballroom, clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield, mentally cataloging every detail that could go wrong in the next 4 hours. The Castellano de Luca wedding, 300 guests, 7-figure budget. Her first event as lead coordinator, even if lead was a generous term for what amounted to Margot dumping the job on her 2 days ago with a dismissive wave and a migraine excuse that fooled nobody. "Jules, we need more champagne on the East Terrace." The voice crackled through her earpiece. Danny, one of the waitstaff, sounding harried. She clicked the mic. "Already handled. Check behind the ice sculpture." "You're a lifesaver." "Not really. Just prepared." Obsessively, compulsively prepared, because that was how you survived in a job where one wrong move could tank your entire career before it even started. Julia had learned early that being underestimated was an advantage. Let them think she was just another faceless coordinator. Let them ignore her. She'd gotten more done invisible than she ever could standing in a spotlight. The ballroom itself was a masterpiece. All soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, walls draped in ivory silk that caught the golden light like captured sunlight. The bride wore Vera Wang, the groom wore Armani, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Julia had seen that look before. Arranged marriages weren't her business. Making sure the cake didn't collapse and the sound system didn't fail was. She moved through this crowd like water, never quite touching anyone, her black dress and pulled-back hair designed for maximum anonymity. A tray of champagne flutes wobbled in a server's hands near the gift table. She steadied it with one hand without breaking stride. A microphone squealed feedback during the best man speech. She'd already signaled the sound tech, who killed it before most guests even noticed. Invisible, efficient, exactly what she needed to be. "Miss Vero?" One of the venue coordinators appeared at her elbow, looking nervous. "There's a situation with the seating in the West Gallery." Of course there was. "Show me." The West Gallery overlooked the main ballroom from a private balcony area reserved for the highest-tier guests, the ones who rated marble tables and premium scotch instead of the standard open bar. Julia climbed the curved staircase, already running through solutions. Wrong name cards? Dietary restrictions she'd missed? Someone's mistress seated too close to someone's wife? But when she reached the gallery, everyone was seated. No crisis? No problem. Just a conversation that made her blood go cold. 2 men stood near the balcony railing, backs to her, speaking in rapid Sicilian. Not Italian, Sicilian, the dialect her grandmother had raised her on in the cramped Brooklyn apartment that smelled like espresso and regret. The older woman had been dead 3 years now, but her voice still lived in Julia's head, sharp and unforgiving. "Never let them see you weak. Never let them think you don't understand. Wasting time on this circus," the first man was saying. Older voice, rough like gravel. "The Castellanos think a wedding will smooth over the territory dispute. Idiots. Let them think it." The second voice was younger, colder, controlled in a way that suggested control was a weapon. "We'll take what we need when the time is right. Marco's too busy playing politician to see it coming." Julia should have walked away, should have turned around, gone back downstairs, pretended she'd never heard a word. But then the second man spoke again, and she stopped moving. "Look at this place. All this money for what? So some spoiled princess can play dress-up while her father pretends he's still relevant?" A pause. "And they hire children to run it. That one downstairs, the coordinator, looks like she should be serving coffee, not managing an event. Probably slept her way into the job." The first man laughed. "Easy, Dante. Maybe she's got hidden talents." "Doubt it. I give her an hour before something burns down." Something white-hot and reckless ignited in Julia's chest. Her grandmother's voice, sharp as broken glass. "You are a Vero. We do not accept disrespect. Not from anyone." She was moving before her brain caught up, heels clicking against marble as she crossed the gallery. Both men turned, and Julia got her first clear look at the one called Dante. Tall, mid-30s, dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so cold, all sharp angles and controlled power. The kind of face that belonged on Roman coins or Renaissance paintings of doomed angels. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, tailored so precisely it looked like armor. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark, assessing, utterly devoid of warmth, the kind of eyes that had seen things, done things. The older man beside him was shorter, broader, with silver threading through his hair and scars that told stories Julia didn't want to know. Both of them were looking at her now with expressions that ranged from surprise to something darker. She should stop, should smile, apologize, walk away. Instead, she spoke in perfect Sicilian. "Forgive the interruption, gentlemen, but I couldn't help overhearing. You're right, I do look young for this position. And you're right that I haven't been doing this long." She kept her voice level, professional, even as her heart tried to jackhammer through her ribs. "But I didn't sleep my way into anything. I earned this job. And if something burns down tonight, it won't be because I failed. It'll be because someone thought they could disrespect me in a language they assumed I didn't speak." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. The older man's eyebrows had climbed toward his hairline, but Dante hadn't moved. Hadn't blinked. He just stared at her with those dark, empty eyes, and Julia realized with a sick, plunging certainty that she'd just made a terrible mistake. "You speak Sicilian." His voice was soft. Too soft. The kind of soft that preceded violence. "My grandmother insisted." She refused to let her voice shake. She said a woman who doesn't understand what men say about her is a woman asking to be destroyed. Wise woman. He took a step closer. Julia held her ground even though everything in her screamed to run. "What's your name?" "Julia Vero." "Julia Vero," he repeated like he was tasting it. "The coordinator who's going to make sure nothing burns down. That's the plan." "And if I told you," he said quietly, "that you just made a very dangerous choice? Then I'd say respect is worth the risk." Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not amusement. Something else. Something that made her skin prickle with warning. "Dante, we should—" the older man started, but Dante raised one hand and he fell silent immediately. "No," Dante said, still watching Julia like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "I think Miss Vero has earned our respect tonight." He tilted his head slightly. "Tell me, are all your staff so bold? Just the ones who were raised by Sicilian grandmothers. And where is this grandmother now?" "Dead." "I'm sorry." He didn't sound sorry, he sounded curious. Julia's earpiece crackled, Danny again, asking about the cake service timing. She needed to go. Needed to get away from this man and his dead eyes, and the way he looked at her like he was deciding whether she was prey or something more interesting. "If you'll excuse me," she said, switching back to English. "I have a wedding to coordinate." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Vero." She looked back. "Mistake. We'll be watching," Dante said softly, "to see if anything burns down. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was a promise." Chikakit. Julia made it down the stairs and into the service corridor before her hands started shaking. She braced herself against the wall, breathing hard, trying to process what the hell she'd just done. Confronted a man in Sicilian, a man whose friend called him Dante, a man who looked at her like, "Hey, you okay?" One of the servers, Maria, sweet kid, always worried, paused with a tray of appetizers. "Fine." Julia straightened, forced her hand steady. "Just need a second." "You look like you saw a ghost." "Close enough." "I'm good. Check on the photographer. Make sure he's getting the couple's exit shots." Maria nodded and disappeared. Julia pressed her fingers against her temples, willing her pulse to slow down. She'd worked too hard for this job, clawed her way up from unpaid intern to assistant coordinator to, barely, lead on this event. She couldn't afford to unravel because some arrogant asshole in an expensive suit had rattled her, even if his eyes suggested he could make her disappear without anyone asking questions. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The cake service went off without incident. The band played, the couple danced. Julia moved through it all like a ghost, checking details, solving problems, keeping everything running smoothly, and trying not to think about the fact that twice, when she glanced up at the West Gallery, Dante was standing at the railing watching her. Not watching the wedding, watching her. By the time the last guest left and the cleanup crew started breaking down the space, Julia's nerves were worn to nothing. She'd done it. No fires, no disasters, a perfect execution that would look great on her resume and maybe, finally, earn her some respect from Margot and the senior coordinators. But that wasn't what occupied her mind as she gathered her things and headed for the parking garage. "We'll be watching." She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over the search bar. Dante. Sicilian. Augustine Hotel. But she didn't type anything, didn't search, because part of her already knew. Men like that didn't just attend weddings. They owned the people getting married. The parking garage was nearly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying insects. Julia's heels echoed against concrete as she made her way to her car, a 12-year-old Honda that had seen better days but still ran, which was all she could afford. She was 10 feet from the driver's door when she heard footsteps behind her. Julia spun, keys clutched in her fist like a weapon. But it wasn't Dante. It was the older man who'd been with him, the one with silver hair and scars. "Easy," he said, raising both hands. "Not here to hurt you." "Then what do you want?" "To give you some advice." He stopped a careful distance away, hands still visible. "You're a smart girl, Miss Vero. Smart enough to speak Sicilian. Smart enough to manage an event like tonight without breaking a sweat. But you're not smart enough to know when to keep your mouth shut." Is that a threat? A warning. Dante Vitali doesn't forget insults. And he doesn't forget interesting people either. Tonight, you became interesting. The name hit her like cold water. Vitali. She knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name, even if they pretended not to. The Vitali family controlled half the port, most of the construction unions, and enough legitimate businesses to make the illegal ones look like hobbies. They were old money, old power, the kind of family that appeared in newspaper charity galas and federal investigations with equal frequency, and she'd just told the heir to that empire to go to hell in his grandmother's language. "I didn't know who he was," Julia said quietly. "That's the only reason you're still walking." The older man, she didn't have a name for him, didn't want one, studied her with eyes that had seen too much. "Go home, Miss Vero. Forget tonight happened. And if Dante Vitali ever crosses your path again, run." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between cars. Julia stood there for a long moment, keys still clutched in her hand, heart hammering. Then she got in her car, locked the doors, and drove home through empty streets, checking her rearview mirror every 30 seconds. No one followed her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, Dante Vitali was still watching. E.T. Julia's apartment was a 6th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood the real estate agents generously called transitional. Translation: cheap rent if you didn't mind the occasional broken elevator and the sound of your neighbor's arguments through paper-thin walls. But it was hers. A studio barely big enough for a bed, a kitchenette, and a second-hand desk where she worked on event proposals until her eyes burned. She dropped her bag on the floor, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto the bed without bothering to change. Her phone buzzed, a text from Danny. "You were amazing tonight. Margot better give you credit." Julia typed back, not holding my breath, but that wasn't what consumed her thoughts. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in the West Gallery. The way Dante had looked at her, not angry, not embarrassed, just interested. Like she was a problem he wanted to solve. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "Never let them think you don't understand." "I understood," Julia whispered to the empty room. "I just didn't know what it would cost, Chad." Monday morning came too fast. Julia dragged herself to the office, a converted warehouse in the arts district where Margot ran her event planning business with the efficiency of a general and the empathy of a parking meter. The bullpen was already buzzing when Julia arrived, coordinators hunched over laptops, phones pressed to ears, the controlled chaos of people planning other people's perfect days. "Julia," Margot's voice cut across the noise. "My office, now." Julia's stomach dropped. She'd been expecting this, a debrief on the Castellano de Luca wedding, hopefully some acknowledgement that she'd pulled it off without disaster, but Margot's tone suggested otherwise. The office was all glass and steel, pristine and cold. Margot sat behind her desk, perfectly styled as always, and gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Julia sat. "The Castellano wedding," Margot said without preamble. Tell me what happened in the West Gallery. Julia's mouth went dry. What do you mean? Don't play games with me. I got a call this morning from Vincent Castellano himself. He said there was an incident involving you and one of the guests. I handled a situation, Julia said carefully. It didn't affect the event. Handled it how? A guest was being disrespectful. I addressed it professionally. Margot's expression didn't change. This guest, did you know who he was? Not at the time. And now? Julia hesitated. I've heard the name. Dante Vitali. Margot leaned back in her chair. Son of Marco Vitali, heir to one of the most powerful families in the city. A man you do not address unless spoken to, and certainly not in front of witnesses. He was insulting me. I don't care if he was setting you on fire. You smile, you nod, you walk away. That's how this works, Julia. These people, they're not our friends, they're clients, and some of them are dangerous. I understand. Do you? Margot's voice went sharp. Because Vincent Castellano sounded very interested in the fact that one of my coordinators speaks Sicilian and isn't afraid of the Vitali family, and that kind of interest is not the kind we want. Julia's pulse quickened. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. No, it won't. Margot pulled a folder from her desk drawer and slid it across. Because you're being reassigned. What? The Morrison baby shower next week. Samantha will take it. You're back on assistant duty until further notice. Julia stared at the folder like it was a snake. You're demoting me. I'm protecting you and protecting this company. We can't afford to have staff who make enemies of people like Dante Vitali. I didn't... Julia stopped, forced herself to breathe. I worked my ass off for that wedding. Everything went perfectly. Except for the part where you decided to pick a fight with a mobster. He's not... But Julia couldn't finish the sentence. Because he was. Everyone knew it, even if nobody said it out loud. Margot's expression softened slightly. Look, you're talented. You've got potential, but you're also young and you think principles matter more than survival. In this business, they don't. Take the demotion. Keep your head down. And for the love of everything, stay away from the Vitali family. Julia left the office feeling like she'd been hollowed out. Back to assistant duty. Back to being invisible. All because she'd refused to let some arrogant criminal insult her. She made it to the bathroom before the tears came, hot and furious. She scrubbed them away, stared at her reflection in the mirror, pale skin, dark eyes, the same face that had survived her parents' deaths, her grandmother's cancer, years of clawing her way through an industry designed to chew up people like her. Principles matter, she told her reflection. But as she walked back to her desk, phone buzzing with new assignments, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dante Vitali had cost her more than she'd realized, and that the cost was about to get higher. The flowers arrived 3 days later. Julia came home to find a massive arrangement sitting outside her apartment door, 24 blood-red roses in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her rent. No card, no signature, just roses that smelled like funerals and promises. She left them in the hallway. They were gone the next morning, but that afternoon a new arrangement appeared, this time on her desk at work, delivered while she was in a meeting. Same roses, same absence of explanation. Margot saw them and went white. Get rid of those, she hissed. Julia threw them in the dumpster behind the building. The third arrangement was waiting in her car. She had no idea how anyone had gotten past the locks, but there they were, roses on her passenger seat, petals perfect and red as blood. This time there was a card. You were right. Respect is worth the risk. D. Julia sat in her car, hands shaking, staring at the note. She should go to the police, should file a report, get a restraining order, do something to make this stop. But what would she say? That a powerful man was sending her flowers? That she felt watched, hunted, like prey being circled by something patient and hungry? They'd laugh her out of the station. She drove home with the roses on the seat beside her, their scent filling the car like a warning. Saturday night, Julia made a mistake. She went out with coworkers, Danny and Maria and 2 others, all of them trying to blow off steam at a downtown bar that served overpriced cocktails and played music too loud for conversation. Julia didn't usually do this, didn't usually let herself relax, let her guard down, let herself be anything other than focused and controlled. But she'd had a brutal week. Margot was treating her like a pariah, The Morrison baby shower had been a disaster. Not her fault, but she'd taken the blame anyway. And the roses kept coming, one arrangement after another, like a slow-motion siege. So she drank. 2 cocktails, then 3. Let herself laugh at Danny's terrible jokes and Maria's stories about her nightmare roommate. Let herself feel normal for a few hours. She was in the bathroom, washing her hands and trying to convince herself that the room wasn't spinning, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. You should go home. Julia stared at the screen, heart suddenly pounding. Another buzz. The bar isn't safe tonight. She fumbled with the phone, fingers clumsy. Typed back. Who is this? The response was immediate. Someone who's watching out for you. Leave now. Julia walked back into the bar on legs that didn't feel steady. Found Danny at their table. I need to go, she said. What? Why? You okay? Just, I need to leave now. Danny frowned but didn't argue. Want me to come with you? No, stay. I'll get a cab. She was halfway to the door when she saw him. Dante Vitale sitting at the bar like he'd been there all night, whiskey in hand. He wasn't looking at her, wasn't acknowledging her at all. But she knew he'd sent the texts, knew he was the reason her skin felt electric and her instincts screamed danger. Julia turned and walked out without looking back. The street was cold, wind cutting through her jacket. She pulled out her phone to call a rideshare, but before she could, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The rear window rolled down. Dante looked at her from the back seat. Get in. No. Julia. Her name in his mouth sounded like a threat and a prayer. Get in the car or I'll put you in it myself. Those are your options. I'll scream. No one will care. He said it flatly, without malice. Just fact. Julia looked around. The street was empty except for a homeless man sleeping in a doorway and a couple too drunk to notice anything. No witnesses, no help. She got in the car. The door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin ceiling. The driver pulled away from the curb before she'd even fastened her seatbelt. Dante sat on the opposite seat, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Where are we going? Julia's voice came out steadier than she felt. Somewhere safe? Safe from what? From the men who were planning to grab you outside that bar in about 10 minutes. Julia's breath caught. What? You made an impression at the Castellano wedding, Julia. Not just on me. The DeLuca family is interested in anyone connected to the Vitalis, and you became connected the moment you spoke to me in Sicilian. I'm not connected to anything. I'm an event coordinator. You were. He shifted slightly and she caught the edge of something under his jacket. A gun, she realized with sick certainty. Now you're something else. Now you're visible. And in my world, that's dangerous. I didn't ask for this. No, you asked for respect. Welcome to the cost. The car wound through streets Julia didn't recognize, heading away from downtown into an area where the buildings grew larger and the darkness felt deliberate. She should be terrified, should be fighting, screaming, trying to escape, but a horrible, traitorous part of her was curious. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Dante was silent for a long moment, then, because you're the first person in 5 years who looked me in the eye and told me to go to hell, and because letting the DeLucas take you would be a waste. A waste of what? He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Of potential. The car stopped. They were outside a building Julia had never seen before, all glass and steel, modern and expensive, with security cameras visible at every angle. Dante's building, she realized. His territory. Come on, he said, already moving. I'm not going in there. Yes, you are. He paused, looked back at her. Because if you don't, you'll be dead before sunrise. Those are the stakes now, Julia. Adapt or die. She followed him inside because she was out of options. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent. Julia kept her arms wrapped around herself, trying to process what was happening. She'd been kidnapped. That's what this was. A kidnapping by a man who sent her roses and spoke in riddles and looked at her like she was a problem worth solving. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected. All dark wood and leather, expensive art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A place designed to intimidate. Dante poured himself a drink. Didn't offer her one. You'll stay here tonight, he said. Tomorrow, we'll figure out next steps. Next steps for what? For keeping you alive. I don't need... You don't get to decide that anymore. His voice went hard. You stopped being invisible when you confronted me. You became a piece on the board, and pieces either play or get taken. Julia felt something crack inside her. Fear, anger, helplessness all tangled together. I didn't choose this. No. But you chose to speak up. You chose principles over survival. So now you live with the consequences. And what are those consequences? Dante set down his glass, crossed the room until he was standing close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, smell the expensive cologne and something darker underneath, smoke and gunpowder and danger. You stay close to me, he said quietly. You do what I tell you, and maybe, if you're smart and lucky, you survive long enough to hate me properly. I already hate you. No, you don't. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw so gently it felt like a lie. But you will. Then he stepped back, and the moment shattered. There's a guest room down the hall. Use it. Don't try to leave. The building is secure, but the streets aren't. Not for you. Not anymore. He walked away, leaving Julia standing in the middle of his fortress, trembling with rage and terror, and something she refused to name. She didn't sleep that night, just sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the door and wondering how one moment of defiance had led her here. To a penthouse prison. To a man who looked at her like she was worth keeping. To a world where invisibility had been her greatest weapon, and now it was gone forever. Morning came with weak sunlight and the smell of coffee. Julia found Dante in the kitchen, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking unfairly human as he worked an espresso machine that probably cost more than her education. Sleep well? He asked without looking at her. Go to hell. Already there. He poured 2 cups, slid one across the marble counter toward her. Drink. We have a long day. I'm not... Drink, Julia. His voice went soft, dangerous. Because you're going to need the caffeine for what comes next. She drank. Hated herself for it. Hated him more. What comes next? She asked. Dante met her eyes over the rim of his cup. You meet my family, and they decide if you're worth protecting or if you're better off dead. Julia stared at Dante across the kitchen counter, the espresso growing cold in her hands. Your family decides if I'm worth protecting or if I'm better off dead, she repeated slowly. That's what you just said. Yes. And you think that's a normal thing to tell someone over coffee? Dante's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. Nothing about this situation is normal, Julia. The sooner you accept that, the easier it gets. Easier? She set down the cup before she threw it at him. Nothing about being kidnapped and threatened is easy. You weren't kidnapped. You were extracted from a situation that would have ended with you in pieces at the bottom of the harbor. According to you, according to reality, he moved around the counter, closing the distance between them with the casual confidence of a man who'd never had to worry about personal space. The DeLuca family doesn't make threats, Julia. They make examples, and you became interesting to them the moment you became interesting to me. Then make me uninteresting. Tell them I'm nobody. Tell them it's too late for that. His voice went flat. You spoke Sicilian in front of witnesses at a wedding that was supposed to cement a fragile peace between 2 families. You embarrassed me publicly, and instead of having you killed for it, I sent you roses. Do you understand what that looks like to people who watch for weakness? Julia's throat tightened. Like you're interested. Like I'm compromised. He reached past her for his coffee, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, white against tanned skin. Which makes you either leverage or a liability. My father will want to determine which. Your father. The Marco Vitali she'd heard whispered about in careful voices. The man whose name appeared in charity galas and federal investigations with equal frequency. When? This afternoon. At the estate. Dante checked his watch. Something platinum and understated that probably cost more than her car. Which gives you 3 hours to prepare. Prepare for what? A trial? An execution? A conversation. He set down the cup, met her eyes. With people who will decide if you live or die based on how you handle yourself. So I suggest you find whatever spine made you confront me in the first place, because you're going to need it. Julia wanted to argue, wanted to run, but the exhaustion of the past few days hit her all at once. The demotion, the roses, the kidnapping, the impossible choice between terror and surrender. She was so goddamn tired of being afraid. Fine, she said, but I need clothes. These aren't exactly already handled. Dante nodded toward the hallway. Second door on the left, everything you need. Of course he'd already thought of it. Probably had someone go through her apartment, catalog her sizes, pick out something appropriate for meeting a crime family. The violation of it made her skin crawl, but she was past the point of protesting. The room he'd indicated turned out to be a walk-in closet that could have doubled as a boutique. Dresses, slacks, blouses, all in her size, still bearing tags from designers she couldn't afford to window shop. Julia stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sheer excess of it. "Pick something conservative," Dante called from somewhere behind her. "My mother appreciates modesty." "Your mother?" Julia said to the empty closet. "Right, because meeting the mob boss's mother is totally normal. She settled on a navy sheath dress and matching blazer, simple enough to be respectful, but structured enough to make her feel armored. Found shoes that didn't make her want to murder whoever had guessed her size. When she emerged 20 minutes later, Dante was waiting in the living room, jacket on, looking every inch the heir to an empire. He studied her for a moment, expression unreadable. "That'll work. High praise. You want praise? Join a different family." He headed for the elevator. "Come on, we're late." The drive took them out of the city, into suburbs that gradually gave way to estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Julia watched the landscape change through the Mercedes's tinted windows, trying to keep her breathing steady. Dante sat beside her, silent, scrolling through messages on his phone with the detached focus of someone reviewing kill orders or stock portfolios, or both. "Why are you doing this?" Julia asked finally. He didn't look up. "Doing what?" "Protecting me. You could have just let them take me. Let this whole thing disappear." "I could have." He set down the phone. "But I didn't." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You think I owe you explanations, Julia? I don't. What I owe you is a chance to survive what you started. Whether you take it is up to you." "I didn't start anything. You confronted a man you didn't know, in a language that marked you as family, in front of witnesses who report every breath I take back to my father. You started something. Own it." Julia wanted to scream at him, wanted to demand he take her home, let her go, pretend none of this had happened. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had gotten her through her parents' funeral and her grandmother's cancer and years of fighting for scraps in an industry designed to break her, knew he was right. She'd made a choice. Now she had to live with it. The Vitali estate appeared beyond a final turn, a sprawling Mediterranean-style compound that looked like it had been airlifted from the Italian coast and dropped into American suburbia. Manicured gardens, a circular driveway with a fountain centerpiece, security cameras visible despite obvious efforts to hide them. Money and power made architecture. Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression tightening. "They're waiting." "Who's they?" "Everyone who matters." He pocketed the phone. "Listen carefully. When we go inside, you speak only when spoken to. You answer questions honestly but briefly. You do not offer information. You do not try to charm anyone. And you absolutely do not mention what you heard at the Castellano wedding. Understood?" "What if they ask?" "They won't, because they already know." He opened the car door. "My family doesn't ask questions they don't already have answers to. They ask questions to see if you'll lie." Julia followed him up marble steps to a front door that opened before they reached it. A man in a suit, security clearly, nodded at Dante and stepped aside. The interior was exactly what Julia had imagined. High ceilings, expensive art, the kind of timeless elegance that screamed old money trying very hard not to look new. Dante. A woman appeared at the top of a curved staircase, descending with the kind of grace that came from finishing schools and careful breeding. Mid-50s, perfectly styled dark hair, a dove-gray dress that probably cost more than Julia made in 6 months. "You're late." "Traffic, Mama." Dante moved forward, kissed both her cheeks with practiced ease. "This is Julia Vero." The woman turned her attention to Julia, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Miss Vero, I've heard a great deal about you." "Nothing good, I imagine," Julia said before she could stop herself. A flicker of something, amusement, approval, crossed the woman's face. "On the contrary, my son speaks very highly of your directness." She extended a hand. "Carlotta Vitali, welcome to our home." Julia shook it, trying not to think about how many lives this woman's husband had ended. Thank you for having me. Oh, it's not a social call, dear. Come. Marco is waiting. They followed Carlotta through hallways lined with family portraits, generations of Vitalis staring down with varying degrees of judgment, into a study that smelled like leather and expensive tobacco. Marco Vitali sat behind a massive desk, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, flanked by two men Julia didn't recognize. The man from the parking garage, the one who'd warned her to run, stood by the window, expression carefully neutral. Papa, Dante said, this is... I know who she is. Marco's voice was surprisingly soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Sit down, Miss Vero. Julia sat in the chair across from his desk, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. Beside her, Dante remained standing, a silent presence. Marco studied her for a long moment. You speak Sicilian? Yes. Where did you learn? My grandmother. She was from Palermo. And her name? Julia hesitated. Giving him information felt like handing over ammunition, but lying would be worse. Sofia Russo. Before she married. Something shifted in Marco's expression. Russo. From the old district near the market? I don't know. She didn't talk about it much. Smart woman. He leaned back in his chair. And she taught you the language. Why? She said a woman who doesn't understand what men say about her is asking to be destroyed. Marco's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. Your grandmother was very smart. Tell me, Miss Vero, what do you think men are saying about you now? That I'm a problem. Are you? Julia met his gaze, refusing to flinch. Not intentionally, but you became one anyway. He picked up a pen, tapped it against the desk. You embarrassed my son. In public, in front of families we're currently negotiating with, that creates complications. I apologize for the complications, not for standing up for myself. The man by the window, the one who'd warned her, made a sound that might have been a laugh quickly suppressed. Marco's eyes flicked toward him, then back to Julia. You have pride, Marco said. That's dangerous in a woman. It's dangerous in anyone, Julia shot back before she could stop herself. But it's the only thing that kept me alive after my parents died and my grandmother got sick and the world decided I wasn't worth noticing. So forgive me if I'm not willing to give it up because your son didn't like being called out for being an asshole. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd gone too far, signed her own death warrant with her inability to keep her mouth shut. Then Marco laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that preceded violence or respect, and Julia couldn't tell which. He set down the pen, leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Someone who also thought pride mattered more than survival. She was wrong, but she was also brave. His gaze shifted to Dante. Your mother would like her. I already do, Carlotta said from the doorway, making Julia jump. She hadn't noticed the woman follow them in. She's got fire. Stupidity too, but fire burns that away eventually. The question, Marco continued, is what we do with her. The DeLucas know Dante intervened when their men tried to grab her. That makes her significant. We can either use that or eliminate the complication entirely. Julia's blood went cold. Eliminate. It's a word we use for problems, Miss Vero. You are currently a problem. Papa, Dante started, but Marco raised a hand. I'm not finished. He turned back to Julia. You have two options. Option one, you disappear. We relocate you somewhere the DeLucas won't find you. New city, new identity, new life. You walk away from all of this and never look back. And option two? You stay. Under my son's protection, which means you become part of this family's concerns. You go where he goes. You do what he says. And you accept that your life is no longer entirely your own. Julia looked at Dante. He was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes, expression giving nothing away. That's not protection. That's ownership. In this world, Marco said, they're the same thing. Then I choose option one. I'll disappear. No, Dante said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He kept his eyes on Julia, something fierce and possessive burning behind the careful control. She stays, he said, under my protection. That's non-negotiable. Dante, Marco began, She stays, Papa. Or I walk away from all of this. The business, the family, everything. His voice was calm, but Julia heard the steel underneath. Your choice. Carlotta made a small sound. Surprise or satisfaction, Julia couldn't tell. Marco's expression went very still, the kind of still that preceded either violence or capitulation. You would risk everything for a woman you barely know, Marco said. I would risk everything for a woman who looked me in the eye and refused to back down. Yes. Marco studied his son for a long moment. Then he sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-some years. You're just like your mother, stubborn and reckless and too damn noble for your own good. Is that a yes? Dante asked. That's a, if this blows up in your face, don't come crying to me. Marco turned back to Julia. Welcome to the family, Miss Vero. Try not to get my son killed. Julia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. I didn't agree to anything. You lost the right to agree or disagree when you spoke Sicilian at that wedding, Marco said flatly. Now you adapt or you die. Those are your options. Dante's giving you a third choice. Survive under his protection. I suggest you take it. She looked at Dante again, searching for some sign that this was negotiable, found nothing but certainty. Fine, she said, voice shaking, but I want conditions. Marco's eyebrows rose. You're bargaining? If I'm giving up my life, I want something in return. And what would that be? Julia thought fast, trying to grab onto something that would give her some measure of control in a situation designed to strip it away. I keep working. I don't become some kept woman sitting in a penthouse waiting for danger to show up. I keep my job, my apartment, my life, or as much of it as possible. Absolutely not, Dante said. Your apartment isn't secure. Your job puts you in public, which is exactly why I need it. Julia stood, facing him directly. You want me to survive this? Fine, but I survive as me, not as some shadow of myself. I need to work. I need something that's mine. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. At least let me be useful. Dante's jaw tightened. She could see him calculating, weighing risks against benefits. Finally, he turned to his father. She can work, but only events we control. Private functions, family business. There's a lot of family business, the man by the window said mildly. Then she'll be busy. Dante looked back at Julia. That's the compromise. Take it or leave it. It wasn't much, but it was something. A lifeline to normalcy in a world that had stopped making sense. I'll take it, Julia said. Marco nodded. Then it settled. Luca? He gestured to the man by the window. You'll coordinate with Dante on security protocols. I want her covered at all times. If the DeLucas make a move, I want to know before they finish thinking about it. Luca, finally, a name for the man who'd warned her in the parking garage, nodded. Understood. Good. Marco stood, signaling the meeting's end. Miss Vero, a word of advice. You've chosen a dangerous path. My son is many things. Brilliant, ruthless, occasionally noble to the point of stupidity, but he is not gentle. And this world he's brought you into does not forgive weakness. If you're going to survive, you need to be harder than you've ever been. Understand? I understand, Julia said, even though she wasn't sure she did. Then welcome to the family. Try not to make me regret this. Julia followed Dante out of the study, through hallways that seemed to close in around her, back to the car waiting in the circular drive. She didn't speak until they were on the road, estate shrinking in the rearview mirror. You threatened to walk away from your family, she said quietly. For me. Why? Dante stared straight ahead, hands steady on the wheel. Because you were right. About what? Respect is worth the risk. He glanced at her briefly, something raw in his expression. I've spent my entire life being told what I am, what I'm supposed to be. Marco Vitali's son. The heir. The weapon. And then you looked at me like I was just a man being an asshole and called me on it. Do you know how rare that is? So this is about ego. This is about the fact that you're the first real thing I've encountered in years. His voice went rough. Everything in my world is calculated, Julia. Every conversation, every alliance, every goddamn breath is part of some larger strategy. But you were just honest. Stupidly, recklessly honest. And I wasn't about to let the DeLucas take that away. Julia didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the fact that her impulsive confrontation at a wedding had led to this, Protection from a man who looked at her like she was a problem he wanted to solve and a treasure he refused to lose. They drove in silence for a while, city rising around them again. Finally, Dante spoke. There are rules now. You need to understand them. I'm listening. You don't go anywhere without security. Luca or someone he approves. No exceptions. Fine. You tell me where you are at all times. If plans change, I know about it. That's non-negotiable. The DeLucas will be watching for opportunities. I'm not giving them one. Julia bit back the protest. Okay. And you don't talk about what you hear. Family business stays in the family. What you overhear, what you see, what you figure out. It stays locked down. I'm not an idiot, Dante. I know how this works. Do you? He pulled the car over suddenly, turning to face her. Because it seems like you think this is temporary, like you can just go back to your life once things calm down. But that's not how this works, Julia. You're in it now, permanently. And if you think that's something you can just walk away from when you get bored or scared, you're going to get yourself killed. I'm already scared, Julia shot back. I've been scared since you showed up at that bar. Since you put me in this car. Since your father looked at me like I was a chess piece he was deciding whether to play or sacrifice. So don't tell me I don't understand the stakes. I understand perfectly. Dante's expression softened slightly. Then why stay? Because I'm more scared of what happens if I run. She met his eyes. Your father gave me an out, a new identity, a new life. But we both know the DeLucas would find me eventually, and when they did, I'd be alone. At least this way, I've got a fighting chance. This isn't a fighting chance, Julia. It's a prison with better amenities. Then I guess I'm adapting. She turned to look out the window at the city streaming past. Like you said, adapt or die. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled back onto the road, and they finished the drive without speaking. He took her back to the penthouse. Julia walked through the door feeling like she'd aged 10 years in the past 24 hours. Everything looked the same. Expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, the trappings of wealth and power. But it felt different now. Less like a prison and more like a fortress. I need to make some calls, Dante said, already pulling out his phone. Luca will be here in an hour to go over security protocols. Don't leave the building. Wasn't planning on it. He paused halfway to his office, looked back at her. Julia. What? You did well today. With my father. Most people fold when he looks at them like that. Most people probably have better survival instincts than me. Probably. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He disappeared into the office, leaving Julia standing in the living room, exhausted and wired and completely out of her depth. She made it to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and let herself shake for the first time since this whole nightmare started. Her phone, her actual phone, which she'd left in her purse, buzzed with messages. Danny asking if she was okay. Maria wondering where she'd disappeared to. Margot's number showing 3 missed calls. Julia stared at the screen, at the remnants of her normal life demanding attention, and realized she couldn't answer any of them. Couldn't explain where she was or why. Couldn't pretend everything was fine when she'd just agreed to become property of a crime family to avoid being murdered by their rivals. She turned off the phone. Luca arrived exactly 1 hour later, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of a man who'd drawn the short straw. He sat across from Julia at the kitchen counter and walked her through a security protocol that was simultaneously exhausting and terrifying. Tracking app on her phone. Check-ins every 4 hours. A panic button disguised as a bracelet that would summon armed response in under 3 minutes. Lists of safe locations, Weixian zones, people to avoid at all costs. This is insane, Julia said halfway through. This is Tuesday, Luca replied without looking up from the tablet. You want insane? Wait until someone actually tries to kill you. Has that happened? To people under Dante's protection? Luca's expression went carefully blank. Yes. And did they survive? Some of them. He set down the tablet. Look, I'm going to be straight with you because Dante won't. You're not the first woman he's decided to protect, but you're the first one he's threatened to walk away from the family over. That makes you different. That also makes you a bigger target. Comforting. It's honest. And honesty is the only thing that keeps you alive in this world. He pulled out a business card, slid it across the counter. My number. You call it if anything feels wrong. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning or you just have a bad feeling. You call. Julia took the card. Why are you helping me? Because Dante asked me to, and because he paused, choosing words carefully. Because you remind me of someone. Someone who didn't make it, and I'm tired of burying people who could have survived if they'd just asked for help. Who was she? Someone who thought she could handle things alone. Luca stood, pocketed the tablet. Don't make the same mistake. After he left, Julia sat at the counter staring at the business card, at the panic bracelet now locked around her wrist, at the phone that would track her every movement. This was her life now. Monitored, controlled, protected, owned. Dante emerged from his office around midnight, looking tired in a way that made him seem almost human. He found her still sitting at the counter, staring at nothing. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Try. He moved to the liquor cabinet, poured 2 glasses of something amber, slid one toward her. It helps. Julia took it, drank, felt fire slide down her throat. Is this what it's always like? The watching, the waiting, the constant awareness that someone might try to kill you? Yes. How do you stand it? You get used to it? He leaned against the counter close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Or you break. Most people break. And the ones who don't? They become like me. He said it without pride or shame, just fact. Hard, careful, alone. You're not alone, you have your family. Family isn't the same as not being alone. He finished his drink, set down the glass. You'll understand that soon enough. Julia wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that family meant something, that connection was possible even in a world built on violence and power. But the words died in her throat because she could see it in his eyes. The isolation, the weight of being Marco Vitali's son, the heir to an empire that demanded everything and gave nothing back except survival. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? That this is your life. Dante looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Don't apologize for things you can't change, Julia. Save your energy for surviving what comes next. And what is that? Tomorrow you meet the rest of the family, the ones who think you're a liability, the ones who want you gone. He straightened, started toward his bedroom. Get some sleep, you'll need it. Julia sat alone in the dark penthouse, glass of expensive whiskey warming in her hands, and tried to remember what her life had been like 3 weeks ago, before the Castellano wedding, before Dante Vitali, before she'd traded invisibility for survival and discovered that the cost of being seen was higher than she'd ever imagined. She drank the whiskey, went to bed, didn't sleep, and when morning came with weak sunlight and the smell of coffee, she got up and prepared to face whatever came next, because she'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. The family dinner was scheduled for 7. Dante told her this over breakfast, if coffee and silence could be called breakfast, while scrolling through his phone with the detached focus of someone reading casualty reports. Dinner, Julia repeated, with the people who want me dead. Not all of them want you dead. Some just want you gone. There's a difference. He set down the phone, finally looking at her. My Uncle Sal thinks you're a distraction. My cousin Nico thinks you're DeLuca bait, and my Aunt Francesca thinks I've lost my mind. Have you? Probably. He stood, reaching for his jacket. But that's not the point. The point is, they need to see you're not going anywhere, that you're under my protection, and that means something. And if they don't care what it means? Dante's expression went hard. Then I remind them why they should. He left for meetings. What kind, Julia didn't ask, and he didn't volunteer. Luca arrived an hour later with clothes for the dinner, laying them out on the guest bed with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Dante wants you in this, he said, gesturing to a dark green dress that managed to be elegant without being showy. Conservative but not weak, you're walking a line tonight. What line? Between being seen as Dante's property and being seen as your own person who happens to be under his protection. Luca studied her. The family needs to believe you're worth the trouble, that you bring something to the table besides complications. I'm an event coordinator. What could I possibly bring? Legitimacy, normalcy. A reason for Dante to stay grounded instead of going full scorched earth on the DeLucas. He moved toward the door, paused. They're going to test you tonight. Push boundaries. Ask questions designed to make you slip. Don't. Any other advice? Yeah, don't drink too much. You'll need your wits. After he left, Julia stared at the dress for a long time before putting it on. The fabric was expensive, the cut perfect, and she hated how good it looked. Hated that she was being dressed like a doll for a performance she hadn't auditioned for, but she put it on anyway. Did her makeup carefully, pulled her hair back in a style her grandmother would have approved of. Elegant, controlled, nothing that could be grabbed in a fight. The thought made her laugh bitterly. She was preparing for dinner like it was combat. Maybe it was. Dante returned at 6, wearing a different suit, charcoal instead of black, still tailored like armor. He looked her over with an expression that might have been approval. "You'll do," he said. High praise. "I'm not good at compliments, but you look—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "You look like you belong." "Do I?" "You will after tonight." He offered his arm. "Come on. We're taking my car. Luca will follow." The estate looked different at dusk, shadows pooling in the gardens, lights beginning to glow in windows like warning fires. More cars lined the circular drive than yesterday. Expensive imports, all black or silver, all screaming money and power. "How many people?" Julia asked as Dante helped her out of the Mercedes. 12. Immediate family only." "That's immediate?" "In this world, yes." He kept his hand on the small of her back as they walked up the steps, a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. "Remember, you're here because I want you here. They don't have to like it, they just have to accept it." Carlotta met them at the door, elegant in midnight blue, her smile warm but her eyes assessing. "Julia, you look lovely. Come, everyone's in the dining room." The dining room was exactly what Julia expected. A table that could seat 20 crystal chandeliers, more silverware than any human needed for one meal. And around the table, the Vitali family in all its complicated glory. Marco at the head, of course. To his right, a man in his 50s with Marco's sharp features and Dante's cold eyes. Uncle Sal, Julia guessed. Across from him, a younger man, maybe 30, with the kind of pretty boy looks that probably got him out of speeding tickets and into trouble. Nico. A woman in her 40s with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes sat beside Nico, Aunt Francesca, and others. Cousins, maybe. Associates. People whose names Julia didn't know and whose expressions ranged from curious to hostile. "Everyone," Dante said, his hand still on Julia's back. "This is Julia Vero, Julia, my family." The silence that followed felt weighted, dangerous. Then Marco spoke. "Sit down, both of you. We have business to discuss before dinner." Dante guided Julia to a seat halfway down the table, taking the chair beside her. Luca appeared from somewhere, standing against the wall like a statue. Other security, Julia assumed they were security, occupied similar positions around the room. "So this is the girl who talked back to you in Sicilian," Sal said, leaning back in his chair. "Have to admit, Dante, I didn't think you had a type, but apparently it's suicidally bold." "She's not a type," Dante said evenly. "She's a person under my protection. Show some respect." "Respect?" Nico laughed, the sound sharp. "We're supposed to respect the event planner who stumbled into our world and now needs a full security detail because the DeLucas want her dead?" "The DeLucas want her dead because I made her interesting to them," Dante shot back. "That's on me, not her. And yet we're all paying the price," Francesca said, voice like honey over glass. "Security, resources diverted, negotiations complicated, all because you decided to play hero for a stranger." "I didn't ask for any of this," Julia said before she could stop herself. Every eye turned to her. She felt Dante tense beside her, but pressed on anyway. "I confronted your nephew because he was being disrespectful. That's it. I didn't know who he was. Didn't know what world I was walking into. And if I could go back and keep my mouth shut, believe me, I would. But I can't, so here we are." "Here we are," Sal repeated, "with a civilian who knows too much sitting at our table." "She knows what she needs to know," Dante said. "Nothing more." "And what's to stop her from going to the police, the FBI? Selling what she knows to the highest bidder?" "Me," Dante said flatly. "I'm what stops her. Anyone who touches Julia answers to me. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. And anyone who thinks they can use her against this family will discover exactly how far I'm willing to go." The temperature in the room dropped. Marco watched his son with an expression Julia couldn't read, pride or concern or both. "You're willing to go to war for her," Francesca said softly. "Over a woman you barely know." I'm willing to go to war for what's right. Dante's voice stayed level, but Julia heard the steel underneath. She didn't ask to be dragged into this. But she's here now, and I will not abandon her to clean up my mess. Noble, Nico said, sarcasm thick. Also stupid. Careful, Luca said from his position against the wall. Just one word, but it carried enough weight that Nico's smirk faltered. Enough. Marco's voice cut through the tension. We're not here to debate whether Julia stays. That decision's made. We're here to determine how we manage the complications. Which are? Sal asked. The DeLucas know Dante intervened. They know he's protecting her. They'll use that. Marco turned to Julia. Tell me, Miss Vero, what do you know about the DeLuca family? Julia swallowed. Just what I've overheard. That they're rivals, that they wanted to grab me to get leverage over Dante. And what would you do if they succeeded? If they took you, threatened you, demanded information about this family? It was a test. Julia knew it was a test, but the only answer she had was the truth. I'd tell them everything I know, she said quietly, because staying alive matters more than protecting people who see me as a complication. More silence. Then Marco smiled. Honest, I like that. He looked at Dante. She's smarter than the last one. There was no last one, Dante said through his teeth. There was Isabel, Francesca said sweetly. Remember? The art dealer who thought she could handle our world? How did that end again? That's enough, Carlotta said, voice sharp. Isabel made her choices. Julia is making different ones. Is she? Sal leaned forward. Or is she just trapped with no way out? Both, Julia said, all eyes on her again. I'm trapped. I know that, but I'm also choosing to survive however I can. If that means working with Dante, learning your world, becoming someone you can use, fine. I'll do it, because the alternative is dying, and I'm not ready for that yet. Nico whistled low. She's got balls, I'll give her that. She's got survival instinct, Marco corrected, which is smarter than balls. He picked up his wine glass, studied Julia over the rim. Tell me something, Miss Vero. What do you think we do? This family. What's your understanding of our business? Another test. Julia chose her words carefully. I think you have legitimate businesses that make money. And I think you have other businesses that make more money but can't be discussed at charity galas. I think you have power because people are afraid of you and because you're useful to people with power. And I think everything you do is calculated to maintain that balance. And how do you feel about that? Julia met his eyes. I don't have the luxury of feelings anymore. I just have survival. Marco laughed, actually laughed, the sound genuine. I like her, Dante. She's practical. She's terrified, Dante said quietly, looking at Julia with something that might have been concern. But she's hiding it well. Being terrified isn't weakness, Carlotta said. It's intelligence. Only fools aren't afraid of this life. Dinner was served, course after course of food Julia barely tasted, too focused on the conversation swirling around her. Business talk, carefully coded. Names she didn't recognize attached to situations she couldn't fully understand. She stayed quiet, spoke only when spoken to, and tried not to think about how every person at this table had probably ordered someone's death at some point. Dessert arrived, something with chocolate and gold leaf that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Francesca set down her fork, dabbed her mouth with a napkin, and turned to Julia. So tell me, dear, what are your intentions with my nephew? Julia nearly choked on her wine. Intentions? You're living in his penthouse, under his protection, wearing clothes he bought you. People will talk. They'll assume certain things. Let them assume, Dante said. I'm not sleeping with him, Julia said at the same time. Francesca's eyebrows rose. No? How modern. We're not. It's not like that. Julia felt her face heat. This is a security arrangement, nothing more. And when it becomes more? Sal asked. Because it will. You're living in close quarters with a man who's clearly invested in keeping you alive. Feelings develop. No, Julia said firmly. They won't. Why not? This from Nico, genuinely curious. You're not attracted to him? That's not... Julia stopped, painfully aware of Dante beside her, perfectly still. My personal feelings aren't relevant. Everything's relevant in this family, Marco said. But I think what my daughter-in-law is really asking is whether you're here for Dante or here for the protection, whether you care about my son or just care about staying alive. Julia looked at Dante. He was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes, expression giving nothing away. She had no idea what he wanted her to say, had no idea what the right answer was. So she told the truth. I don't know him well enough to care about him, she said quietly. Not the way you mean, but I respect him. He could have let the DeLucas take me, could have walked away from the mess I created, but he didn't. So maybe that's not caring. Maybe it's just gratitude, but it's real. Dante's expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been relief or disappointment or both. Gratitude's a start, Carlotta said gently. The rest comes with time. If there is time, Sal muttered. There will be, Dante said. I'm making sure of it. After dinner, the family dispersed. Some to Marco's study for what Julia assumed was actual business talk, others to the sitting room for coffee and continued judgment. Dante guided her out to the garden, away from listening ears, into cool night air that smelled like roses and money. You did well, he said once they were alone among the hedges and marble statuary. I told your family I don't care about you. I'm not sure that qualifies as well. You told them the truth. That's better than well. That's smart. He stopped walking, turned to face her. They would have smelled a lie. And if they thought you were playing me, using me for protection while planning to bolt at the first opportunity, they'd eliminate you themselves. Comforting. It's reality. He was standing too close, close enough that she could see the faint scar on his jaw, the exhaustion around his eyes. You're walking a tightrope, Julia, between being seen as my weakness and being seen as someone worth protecting. Tonight helped, but it's not over. When is it over? When the DeLucas stop being a threat. When my family accepts you fully. When... He stopped, jaw tightening. I don't know. Maybe never. Julia wrapped her arms around herself, cold despite the mild evening. Your cousin asked what my intentions were. What are yours? What do you mean? You threatened to walk away from your family for me. You're protecting me, housing me, putting resources toward keeping me alive. Why? What's the end game here? Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying the garden like it held answers. I don't know, he said finally. I just know that letting you die felt wrong. And everything since then has been about making sure that doesn't happen. Even if it costs you everything? Even if. He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. You think I'm being noble, heroic. But that's not what this is. This is selfish, Julia. Because watching you stand up to me in that gallery, it reminded me that there are still people in the world who operate on principles instead of power. And I needed that reminder more than I knew. So I'm what? Your conscience? You're proof that not everything has to be calculated, that sometimes the right choice is just the right choice, consequences be damned. He stepped closer, and Julia's heart kicked. My father taught me that everything in this world is transactional, that every relationship, every alliance, every decision should serve a purpose. But you don't serve a purpose. You're just a complication, Julia finished. Human, Dante said. You're human. Real. And I haven't had something real in my life in longer than I can remember. The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her. She wanted to reach for him, comfort him, tell him it would be okay. But nothing about this situation was okay. I don't know how to be what you need, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. He stepped back, breaking the moment. Come on, we should get you home before Sal decides to corner you with more questions. They drove back to the city in silence, Luca following in his own car. Julia stared out the window at lights blurring past and tried to process everything that had happened. She'd survived dinner with a crime family, had been tested and judged, and apparently found acceptable enough to keep breathing. But the cost kept rising. Every day in Dante's world, she felt herself changing, becoming harder, more careful, less like the woman who'd confronted an arrogant stranger, and more like someone who understood why you calculated everything before you spoke. Back at the penthouse, Dante disappeared into his office with Luca for what she assumed was a security debrief. Julia changed out of the green dress, pulled on the pajamas someone had left in her room, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing. Her phone, still off, sat on the nightstand like an accusation. She turned it on. 47 messages. Most from Danny and Maria, worried. 3 from Margot, progressively angrier. 2 from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored all of them except one from Danny. Where are you? We're worried sick. Julia typed back, "I'm okay. Can't explain. Please don't worry." The response came immediately. "That's not how worry works. Call me." She couldn't. Wouldn't know what to say. How to explain that she'd been absorbed into a crime family's protection detail because she'd made the mistake of having principles at the wrong time. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in." Dante entered, still in his dress shirt but with the sleeves rolled up, tie discarded. He looked tired and human and dangerously appealing. "Luca's gone through the security footage from the past week," he said. "No signs of DeLuca surveillance on the penthouse, but they're watching your old apartment and your office. So I really can't go back." "Not safely." "No." He leaned against the doorframe. "I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear. What I want doesn't seem to matter much anymore. It matters to me." He was quiet for a moment. "I meant what I said in the garden. You're not just a complication, Julia. You're—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "You're important." "Important how?" "I don't know yet, but you are." He straightened. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start your training." "Training for what?" "For surviving my world." He moved to leave, paused in the doorway. "And Julia?" "What you said at dinner, about not knowing me well enough to care." "That's fair. But for what it's worth, I'm starting to care about you. And in this world, that's dangerous for both of us." He left before she could respond. Julia sat in the silence of the guest room, processing what he'd said. Caring was dangerous, feelings were weapons, trust was liability. But somewhere beneath the fear and the calculated survival, she felt something shifting. Some small part of her that had been numb since her grandmother's death was waking up, drawn to the man who looked at her like she mattered, and that terrified her more than the DeLucas ever could. 3 days later, the training began. Not the kind of training Julia had imagined. No guns or self-defense classes, though Luca promised those would come. This was different. Harder. This was learning how to be invisible again, but with purpose. "You're going to attend events," Dante explained over breakfast. "Family functions, business dinners, charity galas where we need legitimate faces. You'll coordinate them like you've always done. But you'll also watch, listen, report back anything that seems off. You want me to spy? I want you to do what you do naturally. Notice things, people, patterns. You've got an eye for detail. That's valuable. And dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. Might as well be useful dangerous." The first event was a charity auction for the Children's Hospital. Legitimate, high profile, the kind of thing where the Vitali family showed their respectable face. Julia coordinated it with the precision she'd always brought to her work, but now she was watching for other things. Who spoke to whom? Who avoided whom? The tensions that flickered across faces when certain names were mentioned. She saw Nico talking to a man in an expensive suit, their body language suggesting an argument poorly concealed. Saw Francesca excuse herself 3 times to take phone calls, each one leaving her more agitated. Saw Marco work the room with the practiced ease of someone who knew exactly which strings to pull. And she saw Dante, always at the edge of her peripheral vision, watching her watch everyone else. "You're getting better at this," Luca said during a quiet moment backstage. "Most people can't track 3 conversations at once. I've been coordinating events for years. Tracking chaos is my job." "This is different chaos. This is the kind that gets you killed if you miss something." But she didn't miss things. At the second event, a private dinner for Marco's closest associates, she noticed the waiter who spent too much time near Marco's seat, hands shaking slightly when he poured wine. Mentioned it quietly to Dante, who had Luca remove the man for questioning. They found a recording device in his jacket pocket. "DeLuca plant," Dante told her later. "You potentially saved my father's life tonight. I just noticed the wrong pattern. That's all it takes." He looked at her with something like pride. "You're adapting." She was. Julia could feel it happening, the softening of her instinct to trust, the sharpening of her awareness, the way she'd started calculating exits and threats before she even entered a room. She was becoming what this world demanded, and it scared her how natural it felt. The attack came on a Thursday. Julia was leaving a venue after coordinating a corporate event, one of the legitimate jobs Dante had cleared, with Luca's team doing security sweeps beforehand. But somewhere between the venue door and the car, something went wrong. She didn't see them coming. One moment she was walking across the parking garage, heels echoing, checking her phone for the next day's schedule. The next, Someone grabbed her from behind, arm around her throat, pulling her backward into shadows between cars. Julia tried to scream, but the arm tightened, cutting off air. She clawed at it, remembering nothing of the self-defense training Luca had started teaching her, pure panic taking over. "Stop fighting!" The voice was male, accented, Italian, not Sicilian. "We just want to talk." But his grip said otherwise, said this wasn't about talking. Julia remembered the panic bracelet, twisted her wrist, felt the button press against her skin, pressed it hard. "That was stupid," the man said, but she heard uncertainty in his voice, heard him say something to someone she couldn't see, rapid Italian about time and extraction. Then Luca was there. She didn't see where he came from, didn't see the first punch. Just suddenly, the arm around her throat was gone, and she was stumbling forward, gasping for air. Behind her, sounds of violence. Flesh hitting flesh. A crack that might have been bone, a choked-off scream. Someone steadied her. One of Luca's team, a woman whose name Julia didn't know, but whose face was professionally blank as she guided Julia toward a car. "Don't look back," the woman said. Julia looked back anyway. Saw Luca standing over two men on the ground, one unconscious, one groaning. Saw the cold efficiency in his movements as he zip-tied their wrists. Saw blood on his knuckles and didn't ask whose. "In the car," Luca said without looking at her. "Now." Julia got in the car. The woman drove, fast but not reckless, through streets Julia didn't recognize. Her hands were shaking, her throat hurt where the man had grabbed her, and all she could think was how close she'd come to disappearing. They took her back to the penthouse. Dante was waiting when they arrived, face like stone, eyes like murder. "Are you hurt?" First words out of his mouth. "No, just shaken." He crossed to her, hands cupping her face, tilting her head to examine her throat. His touch was gentle, but his expression was anything but. "There's going to be bruising," he said quietly. "Luca?" "DeLuca contractors. We have them in custody. I'm handling interrogation personally." "Good." Dante's hands dropped, but he stayed close. "Find out who gave the order. Find out what they know, and find out if there are more." "Already on it." Luca left. Dante guided Julia to the couch, poured her whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady. "Drink." She drank. The burn helped focus her scattered thoughts. They were waiting for me. They knew when I'd be leaving. Which means they have someone inside the venue, or they're tracking you. Dante pulled out his phone, started typing. "We're going dark. No more events until we figure out how they found you." "Dante." "No." His voice went hard. "You almost died tonight, Julia. You think I'm letting you anywhere near public exposure until we've eliminated every leak? You can't keep me locked up forever. Watch me." He sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. "You're alive because you pressed that panic button. 3 more seconds, and—" He stopped, jaw clenching. 3 more seconds, and I would have lost you." The rawness in his voice undid something in her chest. She set down the glass, turned to face him fully. "But you didn't. I'm here. I'm okay. This time." His hand came up, fingers tracing the edge of the bruising on her throat with devastating gentleness. "Next time you might not be. And I won't let that happen." "Why?" The question came out whispered. "Why does it matter so much?" Dante met her eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. "Because somewhere between the wedding and tonight, you stopped being a complication. You became the only real thing in my life, and I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone take that away from me." Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't calculated. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like fear and relief, and something Julia didn't have a name for. She kissed him back before her brain could catch up, hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "That was a mistake," he said. "Probably. We shouldn't, I know." But neither of them moved. And when he kissed her again, slower this time, Julia let herself fall into it. Let herself forget for just a moment that this was dangerous, that feelings were weapons, that caring about Dante Vitali could get her killed faster than any DeLuca assassin. Later, curled in the guest bed that had become hers, Julia touched her bruised throat and tried to process everything that had happened. The attack, the rescue, the kiss. The way Dante had looked at her like she was worth starting a war over. She was in too deep, had been since the moment she'd confronted him in Sicilian, but now she was drowning, and the terrifying part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to be saved. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dante. "Are you sleeping?" "No." "Me neither. Can I come in?" Julia stared at the message. Knew what this was, knew where it would lead, knew all the reasons she should say no. Typed back. Yes. He appeared in her doorway moments later, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that made him look dangerously human, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I can't stop thinking about what almost happened tonight," he said quietly. "Neither can I." "Come here." He held out a hand. Julia took it. Let him pull her close, wrap his arms around her, hold her like she was something precious instead of a complication. She pressed her face against his chest, felt his heartbeat, steady and real. "I'm not good at this," Dante said into her hair. "Caring about people. Being vulnerable. My father taught me it was weakness." "Your father's wrong." "Maybe, but it's the only way I know how to survive." Julia pulled back enough to look at him. "Then learn a new way. With me." Something in his expression cracked, and he kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise instead of a claiming. And when he asked if he could stay, she said yes. They didn't sleep, just lay together in the dark, talking in whispers about nothing and everything. His childhood in a family that weaponized affection. Her parents' car accident and the grandmother who'd raised her on stories and stubborn pride. The weight of being invisible and the terror of being seen. Somewhere before dawn, Julia fell asleep wrapped in his arms, safer than she'd felt in weeks despite the bruises on her throat and the knowledge that people wanted her dead. When she woke, Dante was gone. But there was a note on the pillow. "We're not done. Not with the DeLucas. Not with each other. Stay close. D." Julia held the note and wondered if staying close to Dante Vitali meant survival or just a slower way to die. Then she got up and prepared to find out. The interrogation results came back 3 days later. Julia was drinking coffee in the kitchen when Dante walked in with Luca, both of them wearing expressions that made her stomach drop. "The men who grabbed you," Dante said without preamble. "They talked." And the order came from Vincent DeLuca himself. Not a rogue operation, not a warning. An actual kidnapping with instructions to extract information about our family's business interests. He set a folder on the counter, didn't open it. "They were going to torture you, Julia. Film it. Send it to my father as a message." Julia's coffee went cold in her hands. "What kind of message? That the Vitalis are weak, that we can't protect our own, that my decision to shelter you was the opening they needed." Dante's voice stayed level, but she heard the rage underneath. "They wanted to make an example of you to get to me." "So what happens now?" Luca and Dante exchanged a look. Then Luca spoke. "Dante's asked for a sit-down with the DeLucas. Neutral ground. Family heads only." "That's insane," Julia said. "They tried to kill me. Why would you—" "Because this ends one of two ways," Dante interrupted. "Either we negotiate a truce that keeps you safe, or we go to war and a lot of people die. I'm trying to avoid the second option. By walking into a room with people who want you dead, they don't want me dead. They want me compromised. There's a difference." He moved closer, hands bracing on the counter on either side of her. "But I need you to understand something. If this negotiation fails, if the DeLucas won't agree to leave you alone, then I'm going to do what I should have done the night they came for you. Which is? Eliminate the threat, permanently." Julia stared at him. "You're talking about killing Vincent DeLuca. I'm talking about protecting what's mine." His eyes were dark, certain. "You think I'm going to let them keep coming for you? Keep putting you in danger? No. Either they agree to peace or I remove them from the equation." "That's murder, Dante. That's survival." He straightened. "Welcome to my world, Julia, where sometimes the only way to protect the people you care about is to destroy the people trying to hurt them. And you're okay with that? With becoming a killer?" Something shifted in his expression, pain maybe, or resignation. "I already am one. Have been since I was 23, and my father decided it was time for me to prove I could do what needed to be done." He turned away. "The sit-down is tomorrow night. You'll stay here with security. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back, Luca has instructions to get you out of the city. New identity, new life. The deal we should have made from the beginning." "No." Julia set down her coffee, voice shaking. You don't get to make those decisions for me. I just did. Dante, this isn't negotiable, Julia. You want to be part of my world? Fine, but that means accepting that sometimes I have to walk into dangerous situations to keep you safe, and it means trusting that I know what I'm doing. Do you? He looked at her for a long moment. I know that I'm not losing you. Everything else is just details. After he left, Julia stood in the kitchen feeling like the floor had dropped out from under her. She'd known this was coming, known that eventually the fragile piece would shatter and Dante would have to make impossible choices. But knowing it intellectually and facing it in reality were different things. Luca found her an hour later staring out the window at the city below. He's trying to protect you, Luca said quietly. By getting himself killed? By ending this before it escalates into a full war. He came to stand beside her. You need to understand something about Dante. He spent his entire life being told that caring about people is weakness, that emotions are liabilities, that the only thing that matters is power and survival. And then you showed up and reminded him that there are things worth protecting even if it costs everything. I didn't ask him to care about me. Doesn't matter. He does anyway. Luca was quiet for a moment. The last woman he tried to protect, Isabel, the one Francesca mentioned, she didn't make it. DeLuca hit squad got to her before we could evacuate. Dante found her body. That's when he stopped trying to save people, stopped letting himself feel anything except duty and rage. Julia's throat tightened. What changed? You did. You looked at him like he was just a man instead of a weapon, and somewhere along the way he started believing it might be true. Luca met her eyes. So if he comes back from this meeting alive, maybe tell him that, before he convinces himself that caring about you is going to get you killed like it did her. The rest of the day passed in agonizing slowness. Dante disappeared into his office for hours, emerging only to take calls in rapid Italian that Julia didn't try to translate. Security doubled. Men in suits appeared throughout the penthouse, checking exits, monitoring feeds, turning the space into a fortress. Julia tried to work, pulling up event proposals on her laptop, but the words blurred. All she could think about was Dante walking into a room with Vincent DeLuca, gambling his life on a negotiation that might end in bullets instead of agreements. Evening came. Dante emerged from his office wearing a different kind of armor, tailored suit, dark tie, the cold mask he wore when he needed to be Marco Vitali's son, instead of the man who'd held her through the night and whispered vulnerabilities in the dark. I'm leaving in 10 minutes, he said. Julia stood. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. They're negotiating about me. I should be there. You should be safe. That's all that matters. He crossed to her, hands cupping her face with devastating gentleness. If something goes wrong tonight, Luca will take care of you. Trust him. I don't want Luca. I want you to come back. I will. He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I never do. He stepped back, and the mask settled fully into place. The dangerous air, the calculated weapon, everything human locked away. Stay inside, stay safe. And Julia, if this goes badly and you have to run, don't look back, just survive. Then he was gone, Luca following, leaving Julia alone with security who wouldn't meet her eyes and a silence that felt like a countdown to something terrible. She lasted an hour before the waiting became unbearable. Tried to read, couldn't focus. Tried to sleep, couldn't stop imagining worst-case scenarios. Finally gave up and sat in the living room, staring at her phone, willing it to ring. It did, 2 hours later. Luca's number. Julia answered before the first ring finished. He's alive, but there's a problem. Her blood went cold. What kind of problem? The DeLucas agreed to a truce, but they want collateral. Collateral? You. They want to meet you. Verify you're not working with law enforcement, not recording conversations, not a threat to their operations. If you pass their test, they'll agree to leave you alone. And if I don't pass? Luca was silent for a beat too long. Then the truce fails and we go to war. When? Tomorrow. 1 hour. Neutral location. You, Dante, Vincent DeLuca, and his daughter Sofia. No weapons. No security inside the room. Julia's hands shook. His daughter. She runs their legitimate businesses, acts as ambassador when they need someone who doesn't look like a killer. Luca's voice softened slightly. I know this is asking a lot, but it's the only way to end this without bloodshed. Put Dante on. A pause. Then Dante's voice, rough with exhaustion. Julia, you promised you'd come back. You didn't promise I'd have to walk into a room with the people who tried to kidnap me. I know, and if there was any other way, is there? Silence. No, Dante said finally. This is it. Either you meet with them and convince Vincent you're not a threat, or we fight. And if we fight, people die. Probably including me. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's real. He exhaled shakily. I won't force you. If you say no, we'll find another way. But Julia, this is the cleanest exit we're going to get. Julia closed her eyes, thought about everything that had led to this moment. The wedding, the confrontation, the roses and the kidnapping, and the slow realization that she'd stopped being afraid of Dante's world and started being afraid of losing him. 1 hour, she said. No weapons, no security. What's to stop them from just killing us both? My father. If Dante and I don't walk out of that meeting, Marco will declare war on the De Lucas. Vincent knows that. He's brutal, but he's not suicidal. Okay. The word came out steadier than she felt. Okay, I'll do it. Julia, just come home safe. Both of you. The meeting location was a restaurant in Little Italy, closed for a private event that didn't exist. Julia arrived with Dante and Luca, the drive silent, intense. She wore the green dress from the family dinner, armor that had worked once, might work again. Dante sat beside her, hand wrapped around hers, grip just shy of painful. Remember, he said as they pulled up. Answer their questions honestly but briefly. Don't volunteer information, and don't apologize for defending yourself. Vincent respects strength, not weakness. What if he asks about what I heard at the wedding? Tell him the truth. You overheard business talk you didn't understand. That's it. Luca parked, came around to open Julia's door. I'll be right outside. Anything feels wrong, you walk out. I don't care if it torpedoes the truce. The restaurant was elegant, old world, the kind of place that had probably seen a dozen mob meetings over the years. A man in an expensive suit met them at the door, De Luca security, Julia assumed, and gestured them toward a private room in the back. Vincent De Luca sat at a table set for 4, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, radiating the same controlled power Marco Vitali did. Beside him sat a woman in her late 20s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a burgundy dress and an expression of professional neutrality. Sofia De Luca. Dante, Vincent said, not standing. You're late. Traffic. Dante's hand pressed against Julia's back, guiding her forward. This is Julia Vero. I know who she is. Vincent's gaze moved over Julia like she was merchandise being appraised. Sit down, both of you. They sat. Julia kept her spine straight, hands folded in her lap, everything her grandmother had taught her about facing men who thought they owned the world. So, Vincent said, you're the girl who speaks Sicilian. Yes. And who confronted my future son-in-law at his wedding? Julia blinked. You're... What? Marco Castellano. His daughter married my nephew, making the Castellanos and De Luca's family. Vincent smiled, cold. Which means when you embarrassed Dante in front of my relatives, you embarrassed me too. I didn't know, and of course you didn't, but ignorance doesn't erase insult. He leaned back. Tell me, Miss Vero, what exactly did you hear that night? What business were you eavesdropping on? I wasn't eavesdropping. I was doing my job, which involved listening to private conversations in Sicilian, which involved checking on guests in the West Gallery. You were speaking loudly. I heard you. Julia met his eyes. You were discussing territory and calling the wedding a waste of time, saying Marco Castellano was too busy playing politician to see something coming. I have no idea what that meant. Still don't. Vincent studied her. And you didn't think to tell anyone? Report what you heard? To who? I'm an event coordinator, not a cop. What you discuss at weddings isn't my business. But you made it your business when you confronted my associate. I made it my business when your associate insulted me. There's a difference. Sophia spoke for the first time, voice cool and measured. You could have walked away, ignored it. Most people would have. Most people weren't raised by Sofia Russo from Palermo. Julia turned to face her. My grandmother taught me that a woman who accepts disrespect is a woman asking to be destroyed. So no, I couldn't walk away, and I won't apologize for that. Something flickered in Sophia's expression. Respect, maybe. Vincent noticed, lips curving slightly. Your grandmother was right, he said. Respect matters, which is why we're here. He turned to Dante. You want me to leave her alone, to stop seeing her as leverage against your family. That's a big ask. She's not leverage. She's a civilian who stumbled into something she didn't understand. And now she's living in your penthouse, attending Vitali family functions, coordinating events for your father's associates. That's not civilian behavior, Dante. That's family behavior. She's under my protection. That doesn't make her family, doesn't it? Vincent's gaze shifted between them, calculating. I see the way you look at her, like she's something worth dying for. That's not protection. That's attachment. And attachment is exactly the kind of leverage I'm interested in. Then we have a problem, Dante said quietly, because I'm not letting you touch her. Even if it means war? Especially if it means war. The temperature in the room dropped. Sophia leaned forward slightly, addressing her father in rapid Italian. Vincent listened, expression unreadable, then waved a hand dismissively. My daughter thinks I'm being unreasonable, he said. She says Miss Vero is exactly what she appears to be, a woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time who's trying to survive. And that continuing to target her makes us look weak, not strong. Your daughter's smart, Julia said before she could stop herself. Sophia's lips twitched. Thank you. Though I should mention that I also think you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid for confronting Dante Vitali in Sicilian. Definitely stupid, Julia admitted, but I didn't know who he was. And now that you do? Now I know he's a man who keeps his promises, who protects people even when it costs him everything, and who's trying very hard to negotiate a peace that keeps anyone else from getting hurt. She looked at Vincent. Including your people. My people can handle themselves. Can they handle a war with the Vitalis? Because that's what happens if this negotiation fails. And from where I'm sitting, that benefits nobody except the people who profit from chaos. Vincent's eyebrows rose. You've learned quickly. I've had good teachers. Julia glanced at Dante. Look, I don't know what you want from me. An apology? A promise I won't talk about what I heard? A guarantee I'm not working with law enforcement? Fine. I apologize for any disrespect caused. I have zero interest in discussing your business with anyone, and I've never spoken to a cop in my life except to report a stolen catalytic converter. What else do you need? Proof. Of what? That you won't become a problem in the future. That if we agree to this truce, you won't leverage your position in Dante's life against my family's interests. Julia laughed, couldn't help it. I have no position. I'm an event coordinator who's staying alive by doing what Dante tells me to do. I have no leverage, no power, no reason to make myself a bigger target than I already am. You have Dante's protection. That's power. That's survival. She leaned forward. With respect, Mr. DeLuca, I don't want to be part of this world. I didn't choose it. I just chose not to die. If that means staying close to Dante until things calm down, fine. But the second I can go back to my regular life, my actual life, I'm gone. I don't want power. I want to be invisible again. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, studying her. Then he looked at Sophia, who nodded once. All right, Vincent said. Here's my offer. You stay away from my business, my family, my operations. You don't coordinate events for any DeLuca rivals. You don't use Dante's name to gain access to places you shouldn't be. And if you ever hear something you shouldn't about my family's interests, you develop sudden amnesia. Understood? Understood. In exchange, I agree to leave you alone. No more attempts to grab you, no more surveillance, no more treating you as Vitali leverage. You become neutral territory. And if someone in your organization doesn't agree to this truce, Dante asked, then I'll handle them personally. Vincent's voice went cold. But that goes both ways. Your people touch my operations, this deal is void. Agreed. Dante turned to Julia. You good with this? Was she? A truce that depended on her staying invisible, staying neutral, staying out of the war between families. It was everything she'd wanted 3 weeks ago. Freedom, safety, a path back to normal. Except normal didn't exist anymore, and she wasn't sure she wanted it if it meant losing Dante. I'm good with it, Julia said. Vincent stood, extended a hand. Then we have a deal. Julia shook it, feeling like she'd just signed something in blood. Sophia stood as well, moving around the table to face Julia directly. A word of advice, she said quietly. This world eats women alive. The ones who survive are the ones who figure out how to be indispensable without being weak. You've got the strength part down. Work on the indispensable. I'll keep that in mind. Do. Sophia glanced at her father, then back to Julia. And for what it's worth, I think you're brave. Stupid, but brave. They left the restaurant together, Dante's hand locked around Julia's like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Luca was waiting by the car, expression carefully neutral. How'd it go? He asked. We have a truce, Dante said. Julia's neutral territory. DeLucas won't touch her as long as she stays out of their business. And if they break the deal, then we go to war after all. Dante's jaw tightened. But for now, it's over. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Julia stared out the window, processing everything that had happened. She'd sat across from Vincent DeLuca and negotiated her own safety, had looked a crime boss in the eye and demanded respect, had survived another impossible situation through nothing but stubborn pride and desperate honesty. Her grandmother would have been proud. Back at the penthouse, security dispersed once Luca confirmed the truce was holding. Julia kicked off her heels, feeling exhausted down to her bones. Dante poured them both whiskey, handed her a glass. You were incredible tonight, he said. I was terrified. Same thing in this world. He touched his glass to hers. To survival. To survival, Julia echoed and drank. They stood in the silence of the penthouse, both of them still wired from the meeting, neither sure what came next. The truce meant Julia was safe from the DeLucas, but it didn't answer the bigger questions. What happened now? Where did they go from here? Could they actually build something real in a world designed to destroy anything soft? I need to tell you something, Dante said quietly. Julia's stomach dropped. What? The night I found Isabel, the woman Francesca mentioned, I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone again. That attachment was weakness, and weakness got people killed. He set down his glass, turned to face her. And then you showed up and proved me wrong. Because caring about you doesn't make me weak, Julia. It makes me human, and I'd forgotten what that felt like. Dante, I'm not good at this. At feelings, at vulnerability, at any of the things that normal relationships require. But I want to try. With you. If you'll let me. Julia's throat tightened. You know this is insane, right? We barely know each other. Everything between us has been crisis and survival, and I know. He stepped closer. But somewhere in all that chaos, I fell for you. For your courage and your pride, and the way you refuse to back down even when you should. And I hope, you feel something for me too. She did. Had been trying not to acknowledge it, trying to tell herself it was just adrenaline and proximity and trauma bonding. But standing here, looking at the man who'd protected her, fought for her, walked into danger because the alternative was losing her, she couldn't lie anymore. I'm terrified of you, Julia said honestly. Of this world, of what caring about you means, of what happens if this all falls apart. So am I. But I do care about you more than I should. Dante's expression cracked open, relief and something fiercer flooding through. Then stay, not because you have to, not because you're afraid of what happens if you leave, but because you want to. For how long? As long as it takes to figure out if this is real or just survival instinct dressed up as feeling. Julia thought about her old life, the apartment she couldn't go back to, the job she'd lost, the friends who'd stopped calling because she'd disappeared without explanation. Thought about what staying meant. More danger, more impossible choices, more nights wondering if Dante would come home or if she'd get a call saying he'd been killed. But she also thought about waking up in his arms, about the way he looked at her like she mattered, about becoming someone who didn't just survive but lived fully and dangerously and real. Okay, she said, I'll stay. Dante kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Julia kissed him back, all the fear and relief and desperate need pouring into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. No more guest room, he said roughly. You sleep in my bed, with me, where I know you're safe. That's very possessive. I'm a possessive man, especially about things I don't want to lose. His hands framed her face. Fair warning, I'm going to be terrible at this. I'm going to be overprotective and controlling and probably make you want to kill me half the time. Only half? If I'm lucky. He smiled, rare and genuine. But I promise I'll try. To be better. To be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. You already are, Julia said. You just don't know it yet. They went to bed together that night. Actually to bed, not the guest room Julia had been using. Dante's room was all dark wood and expensive sheets, masculine and surprisingly simple. They lay tangled together, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, both of them too wired to sleep. What happens tomorrow? Julia asked eventually. Tomorrow, you coordinate the Rossi wedding. It's a family friend, totally legitimate, and Luca's already done the security sweep. Dante's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. You get back to work. Back to normal. Or as close to normal as we can manage. And us? We figure it out as we go. He kissed her temple. No pressure, no expectations, just this. Whatever this is. Julia closed her eyes, feeling something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of surviving long enough to feel safe. I can do that, she whispered. But sleep didn't come easy. Because even with the truce, even with Dante's arms around her and the promise of tomorrow, Julia couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still ahead. That the DeLucas agreeing to leave her alone was too easy. That Vincent DeLuca had given up too quickly. And that somewhere in the shadows of this new life she was building, something was waiting to tear it all apart. She was right to be afraid. She just didn't know yet how right. The first warning came 3 weeks after the truce, buried in details Julia almost missed. She was coordinating the Moretti anniversary party. 50 years of marriage, 200 guests, enough flowers to bankrupt a small country, when she noticed the catering staff acting strange. Not wrong, exactly. Just off. Too quiet. Too careful about where they stood, who they talked to. She mentioned it to Luca during a walkthrough. Probably nothing, he said, but his eyes sharpened. Which ones? Julia pointed out 3 servers clustered near the kitchen entrance, all young men with similar builds, all wearing the same expression of controlled tension. I'll check it out, Luca said, already moving. 10 minutes later, he pulled her aside. They're clean, background checks passed, but you were right to flag them. Trust your instincts. Except her instincts were screaming that something was wrong, and she couldn't pinpoint what. The party went off flawlessly. No incidents, no problems, just a successful event that earned her genuine praise from Marco Vitali himself. But Julia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something, that somewhere in the careful choreography of security and celebration, a piece hadn't fit right. She was still thinking about it 2 days later when Dante came home looking like he'd aged 10 years in 8 hours. We need to talk, he said. Julia set down the event proposal she'd been reviewing. What happened? Vincent DeLuca is dead. The world tilted sideways. What? Heart attack. Died in his sleep last night. Doctors are calling it natural causes. Dante poured himself whiskey with shaking hands. But the timing is too convenient. Convenient how? 3 weeks after he agrees to a truce that protects you. 3 days after Sofia DeLuca started pushing for the family to go legitimate, shut down the more violent operations. He drank, grimaced. Vincent was the moderate voice keeping his nephews from declaring war on every family in the city. Without him, the DeLucas are rudderless and angry. Julia's blood went cold. They'll blame you. They're already blaming me. Tommy DeLuca, Vincent's nephew, the one who wanted you dead from the beginning, he's telling anyone who will listen that the Vitalis poisoned his uncle to break the truce without consequences. Did you? Dante met her eyes. No, my father doesn't operate that way. If we wanted Vincent dead, we'd have done it openly, sent a message. This looks like someone trying to frame us. Who would do that? Someone who benefits from the Vitalis and DeLucas going to war. He set down the glass. I've got Marco pulling resources, tracking down leads. But until we figure out who's really behind this, we're in danger. The DeLucas think we killed their patriarch. The truce is void. And you, I'm a target again. You were always a target. Now you're a priority target. He crossed to her, hands gripping her shoulders. I need you to disappear for a while. Let me handle this. Luca can take you somewhere safe. No. Julia stood her ground. I'm not running. Not again. Julia, you said I adapted, that I learned this world. So let me help. Let me do what I'm good at. Notice things, find patterns, figure out what doesn't fit. She thought about the catering staff at the Moretti party, the instinct that had told her something was wrong. Someone's playing both families against each other. That means they had access, opportunity, and a reason to want chaos. Dante stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to investigate a mob hit? I want to help you survive this. Same thing. It's insane. So is everything else we've done. She reached for his hands, laced their fingers together. You protected me. Let me protect you back. He looked at her for a long moment, something raw and desperate in his expression. Then he pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, held her like she was the only real thing in a world coming apart. If anything happens to you, he said roughly, I will burn this entire city to ash. Then make sure nothing happens to me. They spent the next 3 days buried in information. Security footage from DeLuca properties, guest lists from family events, financial records for every business Vincent had touched in the past year. Julia coordinated with Luca while Dante worked his own angles, both of them searching for the thread that would unravel the conspiracy. It was Julia who found it. The Moretti party, she said, pulling up the catering invoices. Those servers I flagged, they weren't on the original staff list. They were added last minute by someone with access to our vendor database. Dante looked over her shoulder. Who added them? Julia traced the digital signature, felt her stomach drop. Nico. Your cousin Nico. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. That's not possible, Dante said finally. Nico's family. He wouldn't... Look at the pattern. Julia pulled up more files, hands shaking as the pieces fell into place. The wedding where I first met you. Nico was there, talking to someone who made him angry. The DeLuca contractors who grabbed me. They knew exactly when I'd be leaving that venue. Information only someone with access to my schedule would have. And Vincent's death, who benefits most from the DeLucas and Vitalis destroying each other? Whoever wants to fill the power vacuum. Dante's face had gone white. If both families tear each other apart, someone else can step in and take control of their territories. Someone who's been playing both sides. Someone family enough to have access but ambitious enough to want more. Dante was already on his phone calling Luca. I need surveillance on Nico. Everything. Now. He listened, jaw tightening. I don't care if he's family. Do it. The evidence came together quickly after that. Phone records showing Nico in contact with Tommy DeLuca. Financial transfers to offshore accounts. Security footage from the night Vincent died showing Nico's car near the DeLuca estate. And the smoking gun, a recording from one of the servers Julia had flagged, wearing a wire at Nico's instruction, capturing conversations about Vitali business operations. He was building a case, Luca said, playing back the audio. Evidence he could take to the feds or sell to rivals. Enough to destroy both families and position himself as the one who brings order to the chaos. He tried to kill Julia, Dante said, voice like broken glass. Put out the hit on Vincent, framed us for it. Also, he could start a war and profit from the aftermath. What do we do? Julia asked. Marco Vitali answered that question. He appeared at the penthouse that evening with Sal and Francesca, all of them wearing expressions that made Julia want to run. Is it true? Marco asked Dante. Nico's behind this? Yes. Dante handed over the evidence. Files, recordings, financial records. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Marco read through everything with the focused intensity of a man who'd survived decades in a world where betrayal was currency. Then he looked up, eyes cold as winter. Family or not, this ends tonight. Where is he? Safe house in Queens. He doesn't know we're on to him yet. Good. Marco stood. Dante, you're with me. Sal, Luca, bring security. Francesca, take Julia somewhere secure. No, Julia said before she could stop herself. Everyone turned to stare at her. She felt Dante's warning glance but pressed on anyway. You're going to kill him, your nephew, your family. And you should. He deserves it. But before you do, I need to know something. She looked at Marco. Did you know? About Isabel? About what happened to her? Marco's expression didn't change. What does that have to do with anything? Nico mentioned her at the family dinner. Said Dante's last protection case didn't end well. I need to know if that was him too. If he killed her to prove Dante couldn't save people he cared about. Dante had gone very still beside her. Marco studied Julia for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I had suspicions. Never proof. Isabel's death was ruled a DeLuca hit. But the timing was convenient for Nico, made Dante retreat, stop caring about anyone, become the weapon we needed instead of the man he wanted to be. Marco's voice was flat. If you're asking whether I'll make it quick for him, the answer is no. Family or not, he killed an innocent woman and tried to start a war. He dies slow. Julia felt sick, felt the weight of what she'd just confirmed, that Nico had murdered someone to break Dante, had been willing to murder Julia too if it served his ambition, that the world she'd entered was one where family could be your greatest threat. Take her to the estate, Dante said to Francesca. Keep her there until this is over. I want to go with you. Absolutely not. Dante, no. He cupped her face, desperation bleeding through the control. I can't walk into this knowing you're in danger. I can't focus if I'm worried about you getting caught in the crossfire. Please, Julia, go with Francesca. Let me handle this. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand she be there, see this through to the end. But looking at his face, at the fear and fury and determination, she understood. This wasn't about protecting her from violence. It was about protecting himself from losing her. Okay, she said quietly, but you come back to me, whatever it takes. I will, I promise. He kissed her hard and desperate, then let Francesca guide her away. Julia looked back once, saw Dante standing with his father and uncle, all of them preparing for war against their own blood, and she prayed it wouldn't destroy him. The estate felt like a mausoleum. Carlotta was waiting when they arrived, her face drawn with the kind of exhaustion that came from surviving too many family betrayals. I always knew Nico was ambitious, she said, pouring tea with shaking hands, but I never thought family is supposed to mean something. In this world, Francesca said bitterly, family means opportunity. Everyone's a potential asset or threat. Not everyone, Julia said. Both women looked at her. Dante chose to protect me even when it cost him. Your husband negotiated peace instead of going to war. Family can mean something if you decide it does. Pretty words, Francesca said, but they don't change reality. No, but they change how you face it. Julia thought about her grandmother, about the woman who'd raised her on stories and stubborn pride. My grandmother used to say that the world breaks everyone eventually, but some people refuse to let it break what matters. Love, loyalty, the choice to be better than the worst thing you've ever done. That's what separates us from people like Nico. Carlotta's expression softened. Your grandmother sounds like she was wise. She was, and she would have liked Dante. Julia wrapped her hands around the teacup. She would have said he's a good man in a bad world trying to figure out how to stay good. That's worth protecting. The call came 2 hours later, Luca's voice carefully neutral. It's done. Nico's dead. Dante's on his way to you. Julia's knees buckled. Carlotta steadied her, guided her to a chair. How? Julia managed. Quickly, Marco made it quick. Luca paused. Nico confessed everything before he died. Isabel, the hit on you, framing us for Vincent's death. He thought he could negotiate, make deals. He was wrong. And the De Lucas? Sofia De Luca has the evidence. She's taking it to Tommy, proving the Vitalis didn't kill her father. The truce holds, maybe even strengthens. We'll see. After Luca hung up, Julia sat in the silence of Marco Vitali's estate and tried to process what had happened. Nico was dead, killed by his own family for betrayal. And somewhere across the city, Dante was dealing with the aftermath of executing his cousin. He arrived an hour later, hollow-eyed and blood-stained, looking like a man who'd walked through hell and barely made it back. Julia went to him without hesitation, wrapping her arms around him despite the blood, despite everything. He held her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. Is it over? She whispered. Yes. His voice was wrecked. Nico's dead. Sofia confirmed her father died naturally, cancer he'd been hiding from everyone. Nico just used the timing to frame us. Tommy's calling off his vendetta. It's over. I'm sorry. Don't be. He tried to kill you. Tried to destroy everything. He made his choices. Dante pulled back enough to look at her. I keep thinking about what you said, about family meaning something, and I killed mine tonight. What does that make me? It makes you someone who protects what matters, even when it costs everything. Julia touched his face, gentle over the bruising she'd just now noticed. Your cousin chose ambition over loyalty. You chose to stop him before more people died. That's not the same as being him. Feels the same. It's not. She pulled him toward the stairs. Come on. You need to clean up. Rest. Let yourself be human for 5 minutes. They spent the night at the estate, Dante sleeping fitfully while Julia held him through nightmares she didn't ask about. Marco found them in the morning, both of them exhausted and haunted. The De Lucas want to meet, he said. All of us, including Julia. Sophia's insisting on it. Why? Julia asked. Because you're the one who figured out what Nico was doing, and because she wants to make sure this truce actually holds. Marco studied them both. Can you do it? One more meeting? Julia looked at Dante. He looked back at her, silently asking the question. Yes, she said. We can do it. The meeting happened at the same restaurant as before, but the atmosphere was different. Grief hung heavy, Vincent's absence a wound nobody wanted to acknowledge. Sophia De Luca sat where her father had, wearing black and an expression that suggested she'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. Miss Vero, she said when Julia and Dante entered, thank you for coming. I'm sorry about your father. So am I. But that's not why we're here, Sophia gestured to the chairs. Sit, please. They sat. Marco and Tommy De Luca flanked Sophia, both men looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Nico Vitali almost started a war between our families, Sophia said, without preamble. He killed my father's reputation by making it look like murder when it was just life, cancer, the same thing that's killing half our generation. Her voice cracked slightly. And he tried to kill you, Miss Vero, to hurt Dante and destabilize the Vitalis. For that, I'm sorry. You didn't pull the trigger, Julia said. No, but our family's actions created the conditions, made you a target because you mattered to Dante. That's on us. Tommy spoke up, voice rough. I wanted you dead. Thought you were Vitali bait, a weakness we could exploit. I was wrong. You're not weak, and you figured out what we couldn't. Who was really behind this? I just noticed patterns. That's what I do. It saved lives. Sophia leaned forward. Both families were ready for war. If you hadn't found the evidence on Nico, we'd be burying people right now instead of negotiating peace. So we're negotiating peace? Dante asked. We are. Sophia pulled out a document. A formal agreement. Territory divisions, business boundaries, rules of engagement if disputes arise. My father would have wanted this. A real truce, not just words. Marco read through the document carefully, then signed it. Tommy did the same. Sophia added her signature last, then slid the paper across to Dante. Your turn, she said. Dante signed without hesitation. This holds? It holds. We honor it, or we answer to me. Sophia's expression went hard. And I'm done with violence for violence's sake. We go legitimate, we build something sustainable, or we die trying. That's the De Luca way now. The Vitalis can live with that, Marco said. After the meeting, Sophia pulled Julia aside while the men talked business. I meant what I said before, Sophia said quietly. This world eats women alive, but you survived. That's rare. I had help. We all do. The trick is knowing when to accept it and when to stand alone. Sophia handed her a business card. My personal number. If you ever need anything, protection, advice, a job that doesn't involve dodging assassins, call me. Women like us need to stick together. Julia took the card, felt something like hope. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're still dating a Vitali. That's a lifetime of complicated. Sophia's lips twitched. But if anyone can handle it, it's someone stubborn enough to confront Dante and Sicilian. The drive back to this penthouse was quiet. Julia watched the city pass by, thinking about everything that had happened. 6 weeks ago, she'd been an invisible event coordinator trying to prove herself. Now she was negotiating truces with crime families and sleeping in the bed of a man who'd kill to keep her safe. She should be terrified, should be running as fast and far as possible, but all she felt was tired relief and the beginnings of something that looked like peace. What are you thinking? Dante asked. That I never wanted this life, this world, any of it. She looked at him. But I don't regret it, because it gave me you. Dante's hand found hers squeezed. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but real. I love you, Julia Vero. The words hit her like lightning. She stared at him, heart hammering. What? I love you. I'm terrible at it. I'll probably mess it up constantly. But it's true. I love you. Julia felt tears prick her eyes. That's the most unromantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm aware, but it's honest. He pulled over, turned to face her fully. I know this is fast. I know we've been through trauma and chaos, and nothing about this has been normal. But I don't care. You're the first real thing I've had in my life in years, and I love you for that. For everything. I love you too, Julia said, voice breaking. You're violent and possessive, and you make terrible decisions. But you're also brave and protective, and you tried to give me an out when you could have just kept me. So yeah, I love you. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, desperate and deep. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. What happens now? He asked. We figure it out, together. Julia smiled through tears. You keep being a terrifying mob heir. I keep coordinating events and noticing patterns. We both try not to get killed. Standard relationship stuff. Nothing about us is standard. Thank God for that. They went home. Because the penthouse was home now, Julia realized. Not a prison, not a fortress, just the place where she felt safe. The weeks that followed brought changes nobody expected. The Vitali De Luca truce held, then strengthened as Sofia and Marco discovered they could actually work together when they weren't trying to kill each other. Julia went back to coordinating events, but now she worked for both families, a neutral party trusted by both sides. Margot called once, offering her job back. Julia declined. I'm working freelance now, she said. High-profile clients, interesting projects. I'm good. High-profile meaning mob families? Meaning people who pay well and appreciate competence. Same difference. She visited her grandmother's grave 6 months after the truce, bringing roses and stories about a life Sophia Russo never could have imagined for her granddaughter. I know you'd hate this, Julia said to the headstone. The danger, the violence, all of it. But you'd like him, Nonna. Dante. He's stubborn like you, protective like you, and he speaks Sicilian so you could have insulted him properly. The wind rustled through cemetery trees, and Julia imagined it was her grandmother laughing. Dante found her there an hour later holding roses of his own, red, like the ones he'd sent at the beginning, before everything changed. For Sophia, he said, setting them beside Julia's, the woman who raised someone brave enough to tell me to go to hell. She would have liked that. Julia leaned into him. She always said the world breaks everyone eventually, but we get to choose whether it breaks us into sharper edges or better people. Which are we? Julia thought about the past 6 months. The violence and fear, yes, but also the growth. Learning to trust again. Learning that protection didn't mean possession. Learning that family could be the people you chose instead of the ones you were born with. Better people, she said. Still broken, but better. Dante kissed her temple. I can live with that. A year after the Castellano wedding, Julia Vero stood in the rose garden at the Vitali estate, watching Dante negotiate with associates who still didn't quite know what to make of the woman he'd chosen. She wasn't family, not officially, wasn't part of the business beyond her event coordination. But she was there, visible and real, and nobody questioned her right to be anymore. Carlotta appeared at her elbow, elegant as always. How are you holding up, dear? I'm good. Tired of being on display, but good. You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, you'll survive. Carlotta smiled. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm making it up as I go. That's what strength is. Making it up, surviving it, getting better at the performance until it stops being performance and becomes truth. She squeezed Julia's hand. For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what Dante needed. Someone who reminds him he's human. Julia watched Dante laugh at something Sal said, watched him catch her eye across the garden and smile, rare and genuine and meant only for her. He reminds me too, she said softly, that being seen isn't always dangerous. Sometimes it's just being loved. That night, lying in bed with Dante wrapped around her like armor, Julia thought about the woman she'd been at that wedding, the one who'd wanted nothing more than to be invisible, to prove herself through competence and careful distance. She'd lost that invisibility, had it ripped away by one moment of defiance that changed everything, but she'd gained something better, a life that was messy and dangerous and real. A man who looked at her like she hung the stars. A place in a world that should have destroyed her, but instead taught her how to be steel-wrapped in softness. "What are you thinking?" Dante murmured, half asleep. "That I chose this. All of it. The danger, the chaos, you, and I'd do it again." Even knowing what it cost? Especially knowing what it cost. She turned to face him, because the cost was invisibility. "And I'm done hiding." Dante's eyes opened, dark and warm. "Good. Because I'm done letting you." Outside, the city sprawled below them, millions of people living their careful, calculated lives. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Julia Vero had learned that the most dangerous thing you could do was be brave enough to be seen. To stand up for yourself even when the stakes were deadly. To love someone despite the cost. To choose, again and again, to be human in a world that demanded you be anything else. Her grandmother had been right. The world broke everyone eventually. But Julia Vero had learned to break differently. Into someone sharper, yes, someone harder. But also someone who understood that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting up every time, bloodied and bruised and still defiant, and choosing to keep fighting. For love, for truth, for the stubborn, reckless belief that principles mattered even when survival said they shouldn't. She'd started this journey as a woman trying to be invisible. She ended it as someone who'd learned the power of being seen. And in Dante Vitali's arms, in the rose-scented darkness of a penthouse that had become home, Julia finally understood what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Respect was worth the risk. Love was worth the danger. And sometimes the cost of being yourself, fully, dangerously, unapologetically yourself, was the only price worth paying. Everything else was just surviving. This was living.